The mind is not something you conquer once and control forever. It is not a beast to be chained, silenced, or dominated. The moment you believe your mind is tamed is the moment it begins to run you again. The mind is alive. It adapts, resists, reacts, and learns. It cannot be owned, but it can be trained. An untrained mind seeks comfort. It avoids effort. It chases distraction and fears discomfort. It reacts before it understands and speaks before it listens. This is not because the mind is broken, but because it follows patterns it has learned. The mind does not choose strength by default. It chooses familiarity. If chaos is familiar, it will return to chaos. If excuses are familiar, it will repeat excuses. Training changes what feels familiar. Training the mind begins with awareness. Before discipline, before control, there must be observation. Most people live inside their thoughts without questioning them. They believe every thought is truth and every emotion is command. Training starts the moment you step back and notice. I am thinking this. I am feeling this. I do not have to obey it. This separation is the foundation of inner strength. A trained mind does not eliminate fear. It understands fear. Fear becomes information instead of instruction. The untrained mind hears fear and stops. The trained mind hears fear and asks what must be done anyway. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the refusal to let fear decide. The mind is trained through repetition. What you think daily becomes your default. What you tolerate becomes your standard. Complaining trains weakness. Discipline trains resilience. Avoidance trains anxiety. Confrontation trains confidence. Every reaction is practice. Every moment is conditioning. There is no neutral state. You are either training your mind or letting it be trained by circumstance. Discomfort is the gym of the mind. Without resistance, there is no strength. A mind protected from discomfort becomes fragile. Small problems feel overwhelming. Criticism feels like attack. Failure feels like identity. A trained mind has been exposed to pressure. It has learned that discomfort does not mean danger. It has learned to stay calm while the body wants to escape. Training the mind does not mean suppressing emotion. Suppression creates tension. Awareness creates control. A trained mind allows emotion to exist without allowing it to dominate. Anger can be felt without becoming violence. Sadness can be felt without becoming hopelessness. Desire can be felt without becoming addiction. This balance is mastery. The mind resists training. It will negotiate. It will rationalize. It will offer excuses that sound intelligent. This resistance is not failure. It is proof that training has begun. The mind protects its habits. When you challenge them, discomfort appears. Those who quit at this stage remain ruled by patterns they never questioned. Silence is a powerful training tool. In silence, the mind reveals itself. Without distraction, patterns become obvious. Impulses become visible. Training requires the courage to sit with your own mind without escaping. Most people avoid silence because they fear what they might see. Those who train the mind face it directly. A trained mind chooses response over reaction. Reaction is automatic. Response is intentional. Between stimulus and action, there is a moment. Training expands that moment. In that space, choice lives. Control lives. Freedom lives. The size of that space determines the quality of your life. The mind is trained by how you speak to yourself. Internal language shapes identity. Constant self-attack weakens resolve. Honest, disciplined self Talk builds clarity. A trained mind does not lie to itself, but it does not sabotage itself either. It speaks with precision, not cruelty. Training the mind requires consistency, not intensity. Occasional effort changes nothing. Daily practice changes everything. Awareness practiced daily becomes stability. Discipline practiced daily becomes confidence. Focus practiced daily becomes clarity. The mind learns through repetition, not intention. A trained mind understands that thoughts are weather, not terrain. They pass, they change. They do not define direction unless you follow them. The untrained mind chases every thought. The trained mind watches and chooses. Pressure does not break a trained mind. It sharpens it. Chaos does not confuse it. It grounds it. Failure does not destroy it. It instructs it. This is not toughness for display. This is quiet strength built through practice. The goal is not to dominate the mind. Domination creates rebellion. The goal is partnership. You guide the mind through discipline. You correct it through awareness. You strengthen it through challenge. Over time, it becomes an ally instead of an enemy. The mind will never be permanently calm, silent, or obedient. Expecting that is illusion. Training is ongoing. Just as the body requires continual movement, the mind requires continual discipline. There is no finish line, only practice. When the mind is trained, life does not become easier. You become steadier. You stop being dragged by impulse and emotion. You stop being controlled by fear and distraction. You act with intention rather than reaction. You move forward even when comfort is absent. The mind is not tamed through force. It is trained through awareness, discipline, repetition, and courage. And a trained mind is one of the most powerful tools a human being can possess. The mind is not something that can be controlled once and forever. It is not a wild animal that can be captured, locked away, and expected to remain calm for the rest of its life. The mind is alive, adaptive, reactive, and constantly shaped by what it consumes, repeats, and avoids. To believe it can be tamed is to misunderstand its nature. The mind is trained, just like the body, through repetition, pressure, discipline, and awareness. Left untrained, the mind follows comfort. It seeks the familiar, the easy, the immediately rewarding. It avoids effort, discomfort, and uncertainty. This is not a flaw, it is a survival mechanism. But in a modern world where survival no longer requires constant physical struggle, this same mechanism becomes a weakness. An untrained mind drifts, overthinks, reacts emotionally, and surrenders control to impulses. It is pulled by fear, distracted by pleasure, and exhausted by internal noise. Training the mind begins with observation. Before discipline comes awareness. Most people live inside their thoughts, without ever watching them. They believe every thought is true, every emotion is justified, every impulse must be acted upon. Training starts when you create distance between yourself and your mind. You notice the thought instead of becoming it. You see the emotion instead of obeying it. This separation is subtle but powerful. It turns the mind from a master into a tool. Just like physical training, mental training requires consistency. One intense day of focus cannot compensate for weeks of neglect. The mind learns through repetition. What you think repeatedly becomes your default. What you avoid repeatedly becomes your weakness. Complaining trains the mind to look for problems. Gratitude trains it to recognize opportunity. Discipline trains it to endure. Avoidance trains it to fear effort. There is no neutral behavior. Everything is conditioning. Discomfort is an essential part of training. Growth does not occur in ease. When the mind is exposed only to comfort, it becomes fragile. Small problems feel overwhelming. Minor setbacks feel personal. A trained mind, however, has been introduced to control difficulty. It has learned that discomfort does not mean danger. Through challenge, the mind builds resilience. It learns that it can stay calm under pressure, focused under fatigue, and steady under uncertainty. Training the mind also means setting boundaries. Not every thought deserves attention. Not every emotion deserves expression. A disciplined mind chooses what to engage with. This does not mean suppression, it means direction. Just as a trained body does not waste energy on unnecessary movement, a trained mind does not waste attention on destructive patterns. It learns to redirect focus back to what matters. Another key aspect of training is patience. The mind resists change because habits feel safe. When you begin to train it, resistance appears. Doubt, laziness, frustration, and boredom surface. Many people interpret this resistance as failure, but it is a sign that training is working. The mind is being pushed beyond its familiar limits. Progress is not loud. It often feels slow and unrewarding in the beginning. But consistency compounds silently. Training the mind is not about eliminating negative thoughts. That goal is unrealistic and unnecessary. A trained mind does not aim for constant positivity. It aims for stability. It can experience fear without panic, sadness without collapse, anger without destruction. Emotional control is not emotional numbness. It is the ability to feel fully without losing direction. Environment plays a critical role in mental training. The mind absorbs what surrounds it. Constant noise, endless information, and digital overstimulation weaken attention and patience. Silence, structure, and intentional routines strengthen clarity. Training the mind often requires changing what you expose it to. This might mean limiting distractions, choosing disciplined routines, or stepping away from influences that reinforce weakness. Responsibility is the foundation of mental training. Blaming circumstances, people, or the past removes the opportunity to train. When you accept responsibility for your thoughts and reactions, you reclaim control. This does not mean denying hardship. It means refusing to let hardship dictate your inner state. A trained mind understands that while it cannot control everything that happens, it can control how it responds. Mental training is not a one-time achievement. It is a daily practice. Just as physical strength fades without exercise, mental strength weakens without discipline. There will be days of clarity and days of struggle. The goal is not perfection, but commitment. Each day you return to awareness, effort, and intention, you reinforce the training. Over time, the effects become visible. Decisions become clearer. Emotions become steadier. Focus becomes sharper. The mind becomes an ally instead of an obstacle. Life does not become easier, but you become stronger within it. Pressure no longer overwhelms, it sharpens. Silence no longer feels empty, it feels grounding. Challenges no longer threaten identity, they test capability. The mind is trained through how you start your day, how you speak to yourself, how you respond to discomfort, and how you act when no one is watching. Every moment is a repetition. Every repetition is a lesson. The mind is always learning, whether you are intentional or not. To train it consciously is to choose growth over drift, strength over impulse, awareness over reaction. Discipline is often misunderstood as restriction, punishment, or the removal of joy. Many associate it with rigid rules, forced routines, and a loss of spontaneity. In reality, discipline is not the opposite of freedom, it is the foundation of it. Without discipline, life is ruled by impulse, distraction, and emotional fluctuation. What feels like freedom in the moment slowly becomes dependence, chaos, and limitation. True freedom is not the ability to do whatever you want whenever you want, but the ability to do what matters regardless of how you feel. An undisciplined life appears free on the surface. There are no strict schedules, no demanding standards, no pressure to be consistent. Yet beneath that surface lies a lack of control. The body becomes dependent on comfort. The mind becomes reactive. Time slips away unnoticed. Choices are driven by mood instead of intention. Over time, this lack of structure reduces options. Poor health limits movement. Weak focus limits opportunity. Emotional instability limits relationships. What began as freedom slowly transforms into confinement. Discipline works differently. It introduces structure, but that structure creates space. When you discipline your sleep, your energy improves. When you discipline your body, your strength grows. When you discipline your mind, your clarity sharpens. Each act of discipline removes future obstacles. You wake up with direction instead of confusion. You act with purpose instead of hesitation. You are no longer negotiating with yourself at every step because your standards are already set. Discipline removes the constant internal debate that exhausts the mind. An undisciplined person spends immense mental energy deciding whether to act. Should I train today or rest? Should I focus or procrastinate? Should I speak or stay silent? A disciplined person has fewer questions because decisions were made in advance. This conservation of mental energy creates freedom. The mind becomes quieter, not because life is easy, but because direction is clear. Freedom without discipline is fragile. It collapses under pressure. When challenges arise, habits determine the response. Discipline prepares you for moments when motivation disappears. Motivation is emotional and temporary. Discipline is reliable. It carries you through fatigue, boredom, and doubt. This reliability creates independence. You are no longer dependent on feeling good to do what is necessary. That independence is freedom. Discipline also builds self-trust. Every time you follow through on a commitment, you reinforce the belief that you can rely on yourself. This trust is deeply liberating. Many people feel trapped not by circumstances, but by their inability to trust their own actions. They plan, but do not execute. They promise, but do not follow through. Discipline repairs this fracture. When you trust yourself, fear decreases and confidence becomes grounded rather than performative. There is discipline in saying no. Every yes carries a cost. Time, energy, attention, and focus are finite. Without discipline, they are spent on distractions, obligations imposed by others, and habits that offer immediate pleasure but long-term regret. Discipline teaches you to protect what matters. It gives you the freedom to choose depth over noise, progress over approval, and long-term gain over short-term comfort. Discipline is not about control over others. It is about mastery over self. This mastery does not arrive suddenly. It is built through small, repeated actions. Waking up when you said you would. completing tasks even when enthusiasm is absent, maintaining standards when no one is watching. These moments seem insignificant, but they compound. Over time, discipline reshapes identity. You no longer force yourself to act. Acting becomes natural. Many fear discipline because they believe it will make life rigid and joyless. In truth, discipline creates room for genuine enjoyment. When responsibilities are handled, leisure is earned without guilt. When the body is strong, rest feels restorative. When the mind is focused, relaxation is deeper. Undisciplined pleasure often feels hollow because it is used as escape. Disciplined pleasure feels full because it is chosen. Not needed discipline also creates emotional freedom. Emotions are powerful, but when they dictate behavior, instability follows. A disciplined individual acknowledges emotions without surrendering direction. Anger does not decide actions. Fear does not control movement. Sadness does not halt progress. This does not mean suppressing emotions. It means not allowing them to dominate. Emotional freedom is the ability to feel deeply without losing control. Structure does not limit creativity. It supports it. Many of the most creative minds operate within strict routines. Discipline removes chaos so that creativity has room to emerge. When time is structured, the mind can explore. When habits are stable, innovation becomes possible. Freedom of expression is sustained by discipline of practice. Discipline also prepares you for hardship. Life is unpredictable. Pain, loss, and failure arrive without permission. Without discipline, these moments break momentum and identity. With discipline, they are absorbed and endured. Discipline builds resilience. It teaches you to continue despite discomfort. This endurance is a form of freedom because it prevents circumstances from defining who you become. Every disciplined action is a vote for the future you want. Freedom is not experienced all at once. It is built gradually. Financial discipline creates choice. Physical discipline creates mobility. Mental discipline creates peace. Social discipline creates respect. Each area reinforces the others. The more disciplined you become, the less life controls you. Discipline does not remove struggle. It gives struggle meaning. It turns effort into progress and sacrifice into strength. It aligns actions with values instead of impulses. Over time, the disciplined life feels lighter, not heavier. What once required force now requires presence. What once felt restrictive now feels stabilizing. The paradox is simple but demanding. The more discipline you apply, the more freedom you experience. The less discipline you apply, the more limited your world becomes. Discipline decides whether you are led by intention or dragged by circumstance, whether your future is shaped by choice or eroded by habit, whether freedom is something you chase or something you live within each day through aligned action, controlled effort, and the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you are capable of doing what must be done, regardless of how it feels in the moment. Silence before action is not hesitation, weakness, or avoidance. It is a deliberate pause that creates clarity where impulse would otherwise rule. In a world that rewards speed, reaction, and constant expression, silence appears unproductive. Yet silence is the space where intention is formed and direction becomes clear. Action without silence is often driven by emotion, fear, or habit. Silence allows action to be chosen rather than triggered. Most mistakes are not made because of lack of knowledge, but because of lack of pause. The mind reacts faster than it understands. Words are spoken before meaning is examined. Decisions are made before consequences are considered. Silence interrupts this cycle. It creates distance between stimulus and response. In that distance, awareness grows. Awareness is what transforms reaction into conscious action. Silence sharpens perception. When external noise fades, internal patterns become visible. Thoughts slow down. Emotions reveal their origin. Intentions become clearer. Without silence, the mind remains cluttered, constantly responding to demands, opinions, and distractions. Silence is not empty, it is informative. It shows what is truly present beneath the surface of constant mental movement. Before action, silence allows alignment. Many actions fail not because they are wrong, but because they are misaligned with values. When action is rushed, it often serves ego, fear, or immediate gratification. Silence allows values to surface. It asks quiet questions. Why am I doing this? What am I trying to protect? What am I trying to prove? These questions are rarely answered in noise. They require stillness. Silence strengthens emotional control. Emotions are powerful forces. They are useful signals, but poor leaders. Anger pushes toward confrontation. Fear urges retreat. Excitement rushes commitment. Silence gives emotions time to settle. It does not suppress them, but it prevents them from hijacking behavior. A calm response does not eliminate intensity. It directs it with precision. In silence, the body also speaks. Tension, fatigue, restlessness, and readiness become noticeable. Many actions fail because the body is ignored. Silence reconnects awareness to physical state. It reveals when to move and when to wait. Action taken with bodily awareness is more sustainable and effective. Silence is also a form of discipline. It requires restraint in a culture of expression. Not every thought needs to be spoken. Not every urge needs to be acted upon. Silence builds inner authority. It teaches patience. It trains the mind to tolerate stillness without reaching for distraction. This tolerance is strength. It allows you to remain centered even when the environment is chaotic. Before conflict, silence prevents unnecessary damage. Words spoken in emotional heat often create consequences that last longer than the emotion itself. Silence creates space to choose language carefully. It allows understanding before judgment. Silence does not mean passivity, it means precision. When action follows silence, it is measured, intentional, and effective. Silence before action also cultivates humility. It acknowledges that not everything is immediately understood. It accepts that first impressions may be incomplete. This humility prevents arrogance and reduces error. Many failures are the result of acting on partial information or inflated confidence. Silence allows learning to occur before commitment. In leadership, silence builds trust. Leaders who act impulsively create instability. Those who pause before acting demonstrate confidence and control. Silence signals that decisions are not driven by pressure or ego. It creates predictability. People feel safer when actions are considered rather than reactive. Silence gives weight to action. When someone who speaks little finally acts, the action carries authority. Silence is not inaction. It is preparation. Just as a bow must be drawn back before releasing an arrow, silence gathers focus and energy. Action launched from silence is stronger because it is directed. It is not scattered across doubt and emotion. It moves with purpose. Silence also protects energy. Constant reaction is exhausting. Every emotional response drains attention. Silence conserves energy by reducing unnecessary engagement. This preserved energy can be invested in actions that matter. Efficiency is born from restraint. Silence creates space for intuition. Intuition is subtle. It cannot compete with noise. It emerges only when the mind is quiet enough to notice it. Many wise decisions are not purely logical. They arise from integrated understanding. Silence allows this integration. It connects experience, knowledge, and instinct into coherent direction. In moments of pressure, silence is grounding. When urgency demands immediate response, silence slows time. It prevents panic. It anchors attention to the present. This grounding improves decision quality. Under pressure, trained individuals rely on pause rather than speed. They trust silence more than impulse. Silence also teaches self-respect. Acting without pause often seeks validation or relief. Silence breaks this dependency. It builds independence from external reaction. You no longer act to be seen or heard. You act because it is necessary. This shift changes motivation from approval to purpose. Over time, silence becomes a habit. The mind learns to pause automatically. This does not make action slower, it makes it cleaner. Fewer mistakes are made. Fewer apologies are required. Less energy is wasted repairing damage. Life becomes simpler not because challenges disappear, but because responses improve. Silence before action creates a life guided by intention rather than reaction. It transforms chaos into order and pressure into clarity. It is the invisible discipline that strengthens every visible action. In silence, direction is chosen, strength is gathered, and action becomes an expression of awareness rather than impulse. Responsibility is often perceived as weight, obligation, or burden. Many associate it with pressure, blame, or sacrifice. Yet responsibility is not something that weakens a person, it is what gives a person power. The moment responsibility is accepted, control is reclaimed. The moment it is avoided, power is surrendered. Responsibility determines whether life happens to you or is shaped by you. Avoiding responsibility feels easier in the moment. Blame offers comfort. Excuses protect the ego. Circumstances become convenient explanations for inaction. But this comfort is temporary and costly. Each time responsibility is avoided, dependence increases. The mind waits for conditions to improve, for others to change, for motivation to appear. Waiting erodes agency. Over time, the habit of avoidance becomes a prison built from passivity and resentment. Responsibility shifts focus inward. It does not deny external factors, injustice, or difficulty. It simply refuses to let them define the response. When you accept responsibility, you acknowledge that while you may not control everything that happens, you always control how you act. This acknowledgement is empowering. It places the source of change within reach rather than outside of it. Power comes from influence, and responsibility expands influence. When you take responsibility for your thoughts, you can change your mindset. When you take responsibility for your actions, you can change your outcomes. When you take responsibility for your habits, you can change your future. Blame narrows influence. Responsibility widens it. It opens options instead of closing them. Responsibility also clarifies direction. Without it, life feels confusing and unfair. Problems appear random. Effort feels pointless. With responsibility, Challenges become signals rather than punishments. Mistakes become lessons rather than identity. Responsibility transforms failure into feedback. This reframing creates forward movement instead of stagnation. Taking responsibility requires courage. It means facing uncomfortable truths. It means acknowledging personal contribution to unwanted outcomes. This honesty can feel threatening at first, but avoiding truth weakens. Facing it strengthens. Responsibility builds self-respect because it aligns actions with reality rather than illusion. There is dignity in ownership, even when ownership reveals flaws. Responsibility creates consistency. When responsibility is externalized, effort fluctuates. Action depends on mood, validation, or favorable conditions. When responsibility is internalized, effort becomes stable. You act because it is your duty to yourself, not because it feels good or is noticed. This consistency builds momentum. Momentum builds confidence. Confidence expands capacity. Power is not dominance over others, it is mastery over self. Responsibility is the pathway to that mastery. When you take responsibility for your reactions, others lose the ability to control your emotional state. When you take responsibility for your time, distractions lose their grip. When you take responsibility for your growth, stagnation loses its comfort. Each act of responsibility removes a point of vulnerability. Responsibility also strengthens relationships. When individuals own their actions, communication becomes clearer, conflicts become solvable, trust grows. Avoiding responsibility creates defensiveness and blame. Responsibility creates accountability and repair. It allows relationships to evolve rather than fracture. There is freedom in responsibility. It may seem paradoxical, but it is true. When responsibility is avoided, you are tied to excuses and explanations. When responsibility is accepted, you are free to act. You no longer need permission to improve your life. You no longer wait for external rescue. Responsibility removes dependence. Independence is a form of freedom. Responsibility also sharpens decision-making. When you know you will own the outcome, choices become more deliberate. You weigh consequences more carefully. You act with intention rather than impulse. This foresight prevents unnecessary damage. It reduces regret. Responsibility turns choices into investments rather than gambles. In difficult moments, responsibility stabilizes the mind. When things go wrong, the responsible mind asks, what can be done now? The irresponsible mind asks why this happened to me. One question leads to action. The other leads to paralysis. Responsibility keeps you oriented toward solutions rather than suffering. Responsibility is not about control over everything. It is about control over effort. You cannot guarantee results, but you can guarantee commitment. You cannot predict outcomes, but you can choose preparation. This focus on effort rather than outcome reduces fear. It keeps attention on what is within reach. Responsibility builds resilience. Each challenge faced and owned strengthens capacity. Avoided challenges accumulate and grow heavier. Owned challenges are processed and integrated. Over time, the responsible individual becomes harder to destabilize. Setbacks do not destroy momentum. They refine it. Responsibility also eliminates entitlement. Entitlement expects reward without effort. Responsibility accepts effort without guarantee. This acceptance creates humility and persistence. It aligns expectations with reality. Life becomes less disappointing when expectations are grounded in responsibility rather than assumption. Power grows quietly through responsibility. There is no immediate applause. Often there is no recognition at all. But internally, strength accumulates. The responsible individual becomes reliable, steady, and capable. Others sense this. Opportunities follow those who demonstrate ownership. Trust is extended to those who do not deflect blame. Responsibility is not inherited. It is chosen daily. It appears in small actions, showing up when it is difficult, admitting mistakes without justification, correcting behavior instead of defending it. These moments seem ordinary, but they shape character. When responsibility becomes a habit, life becomes clearer. Decisions feel cleaner. Challenges feel manageable. Identity becomes stable. You are no longer defined by what happens to you, but by how you respond. Responsibility places you at the center of your life, not as a victim of circumstance, but as an active participant in your own development, growth, and direction. Pain is often treated as something to avoid, silence, or escape. It is labeled as failure, weakness, or misfortune. From an early age, people are taught to seek comfort and resist discomfort, to remove pain as quickly as possible rather than understand it. Yet pain is not random cruelty. It is information. It is feedback from life, the body and the mind. When understood correctly, pain becomes one of the most effective teachers a person can encounter. Pain reveals limits. Physical pain shows where the body is weak, overused, or neglected. Emotional pain exposes unmet needs, broken expectations, and unresolved attachments. Mental pain highlights confusion, internal conflict, and misalignment between values and actions. Without pain, these signals would remain hidden. Comfort numbs awareness. Pain sharpens it. Many people make pain their enemy because it disrupts comfort. But comfort rarely produces growth. Pain forces attention. It demands presence. It cannot be ignored for long without consequence. When pain appears, it asks a question: what needs to change? Avoiding the question prolongs the lesson. Listening to it accelerates learning. Pain teaches resilience. When experienced consciously rather than resisted, it expands capacity. The first encounter with difficulty feels overwhelming. Repeated exposure builds tolerance. What once felt unbearable becomes manageable. This is how strength is built. Muscles grow through resistance. Character grows through adversity. Pain provides the resistance required for inner development. Pain also teaches humility. It reminds individuals of their limits, mistakes, and vulnerability. This humility is not weakness. It prevents arrogance and complacency. It keeps learning alive. Those who have never faced pain often develop fragile confidence. Those who have faced it and endured carry grounded strength. Emotional pain teaches awareness of attachment. Loss reveals what was valued. Betrayal reveals where trust was placed. Rejection reveals dependence on external validation. These experiences hurt because they touch something important. Pain highlights where identity is tied too tightly to people, outcomes, or expectations. Through pain, detachment is learned not as indifference, but as balance. Pain teaches responsibility. It removes the illusion that actions are without consequence. Poor habits create physical pain. Avoided conversations create relational pain. Self-betrayal creates internal pain. When responsibility is taken, pain becomes a guide rather than a punishment. It shows the cost of choices clearly and honestly. Mental pain often signals inner resistance. Anxiety appears when the mind anticipates loss of control. Guilt appears when actions violate personal values. Shame appears when identity is threatened. These forms of pain are uncomfortable, but they carry instruction. They point toward alignment, integrity, and courage. Suppressing them does not remove the cause. Understanding them allows correction. Pain also teaches patience. Healing takes time. Growth is not immediate. Pain slows life down and forces endurance. In this slowing, depth is developed. Quick pleasure teaches little. Slow struggle teaches much. Through pain, people learn to stay present even when there is no immediate reward. Pain separates what is superficial from what is essential. When life is easy, distractions multiply. When pain arrives, clarity follows. Priorities shift. What matters becomes obvious. What does not falls away. Pain strips away excess and reveals core values. Avoiding pain creates sensitivity. The more pain is avoided, the more threatening it feels. Small discomforts become overwhelming. Minor setbacks feel catastrophic. Facing pain builds robustness. It trains the nervous system to remain stable under stress. This stability is confidence rooted in experience rather than belief. Pain teaches empathy. Those who have suffered understand others more deeply. They listen better. They judge less quickly. Pain softens arrogance and sharpens compassion. It creates connection through shared humanity. Without pain, understanding remains theoretical. Pain also teaches discipline. Growth requires doing what is necessary, not what is comfortable. Pain accompanies effort, change, and transformation. Those who accept pain as part of the process progress steadily. Those who treat pain as a sign to stop remain stuck. Discipline reframes pain from obstacle to indicator of progress. There is pain that refines and pain that damages. The difference lies in awareness and choice. Conscious pain strengthens. Unconscious pain repeats. When lessons are ignored, pain returns in different forms. When lessons are learned, pain evolves into wisdom. Pain is not permanent, but the lessons can be. Every painful experience carries insight about boundaries, values, resilience, or truth. Extracting the lesson reduces suffering. Resisting it multiplies it. Pain loses its grip when its message is understood. Pain also teaches presence. It pulls attention out of the past and future into the moment. In pain, the present becomes unavoidable. This presence, though uncomfortable, is grounding. It reconnects individuals to reality rather than fantasy. Reality is where change occurs. Fear of pain creates stagnation. Growth always carries risk of discomfort. Avoiding pain means avoiding growth. Accepting pain as a teacher allows movement forward despite uncertainty. Courage is not the absence of pain, but the willingness to learn from it. Pain does not arrive to destroy. It arrives to instruct, correct, and strengthen. When treated as an enemy, it creates bitterness. When treated as a teacher, it creates wisdom. The same pain can break one person and build another. The difference lies in interpretation. Those who learn from pain do not seek it unnecessarily, but they do not run from it. They listen, they adapt, they grow. Over time, pain loses its power to intimidate. It becomes a familiar signal rather than a threat. Life remains challenging, but fear decreases. Pain refines identity. It removes illusions about strength and reveals real capability. It exposes false priorities and reinforces authentic ones. Through pain, individuals discover what they can endure and who they can become. Pain is not the opposite of peace. It is often the path toward it. By facing pain directly, avoiding denial, and extracting its lessons, inner stability develops. The body learns its limits, the mind learns its patterns, and the spirit learns its resilience. Pain, when approached with awareness and responsibility, becomes one of the most honest and effective teachers a person will ever encounter. Motivation is celebrated as the driving force behind success. It is portrayed as energy, inspiration, and desire that pushes people to begin. While motivation can spark action, it is unreliable by nature. It rises and falls with mood, circumstances, and emotion. Consistency, on the other hand, does not depend on feeling ready or inspired. It depends on commitment. Over time, consistency outperforms motivation because it produces steady progress regardless of internal fluctuation. Motivation is emotional. It responds to excitement, novelty, and reward. When conditions are favorable, motivation feels powerful. But when difficulty appears, motivation fades. Fatigue, boredom, fear, and doubt weaken it. Many people wait for motivation to return before acting. This waiting delays growth. Consistency removes the need to feel motivated. It transforms action into routine rather than decision. Consistency builds identity. When actions are repeated regularly, they become part of who you are rather than something you attempt. A person who trains consistently does not debate whether to exercise. It is simply what they do. A person who works consistently does not rely on bursts of inspiration. Progress becomes habitual. Identity-based action is stable because it is not tied to temporary emotion. Motivation often exaggerates expectations. It creates enthusiasm that demands quick results. When results do not arrive fast enough, disappointment follows. Consistency understands time. It respects gradual improvement. It accepts that meaningful change compounds slowly. This patience reduces frustration and prevents burnout. Consistency also builds trust with oneself. Every small action completed as promised reinforces reliability. Over time, this reliability becomes confidence. Confidence built on consistency is grounded and resilient. Motivation-based confidence collapses when inspiration disappears. Consistency-based confidence remains because it is supported by evidence of follow-through. The disciplined routine of consistency reduces mental friction. Decisions drain energy. When actions are habitual, energy is conserved. The mind no longer negotiates whether to act, it simply acts. This conservation of energy allows focus to be directed toward improvement rather than deliberation. Motivation seeks intensity. Consistency values sustainability. Intensity can produce short-term results, but often leads to exhaustion. Consistency allows progress without collapse. It creates rhythms that can be maintained through busy schedules, emotional lows, and unexpected obstacles. Sustainable effort outlasts passionate bursts. Consistency also builds skill. Skills are refined through repetition, not enthusiasm. Mastery is developed through daily practice, not occasional inspiration. Consistent practice reveals subtle errors and improvements that motivation overlooks. Through repetition, awareness deepens and performance stabilizes. Motivation tends to focus on outcomes. Consistency focuses on process. When attention is placed on outcomes, disappointment arises easily. When attention is placed on process, satisfaction is found in execution. This shift reduces anxiety and increases enjoyment. Progress becomes its own reward. Consistency creates momentum. Small actions repeated daily accumulate into significant change. Momentum reduces resistance. Once movement is established, continuing becomes easier. Motivation struggles to create this momentum because it is sporadic. Consistency maintains it. Consistency also prepares for difficult days. Life is unpredictable. Stress, illness, and emotional challenges disrupt motivation. Consistency provides structure during chaos. It offers stability when emotions are unstable. This stability prevents regression during hardship. Motivation often depends on external validation. Praise, recognition, and visible progress fuel it. Consistency relies on internal standards. It continues regardless of recognition. This independence strengthens self-direction and reduces dependence on external approval. Consistency teaches humility. Progress through consistency is slow and often unnoticed. It requires faith in the process without constant reward. This humility keeps ego in check and learning active. Motivation-driven action can inflate ego during highs and deflate it during lows. Consistency also reduces fear. Fear thrives in uncertainty. Regular action creates familiarity. Familiarity reduces anxiety. When tasks are done consistently, they lose their intimidation. Confidence grows not from thinking but from doing. Consistency allows adaptation. When action is regular, feedback is constant. Adjustments can be made quickly. Motivation-driven action is sporadic, making feedback unclear. Consistency provides data. It shows what works and what does not through experience rather than speculation. Motivation often starts strong but lacks endurance. Consistency starts small but persists. Persistence is what creates lasting change. Many ambitious plans fail not because they are wrong, but because they are abandoned. Consistency protects effort from abandonment. Consistency also creates freedom. When progress is steady, pressure decreases. Deadlines feel manageable. Goals feel reachable. Life feels less chaotic. This freedom comes from trust in routine rather than hope for inspiration. Consistency aligns action with values rather than mood. Values are stable. Moods are temporary. Acting from values creates integrity. Integrity creates peace. Motivation can pull action in different directions depending on emotion. Consistency anchors action. Consistency is not perfection. Missed days will happen. What matters is return. Returning quickly reinforces commitment. Motivation often interprets failure as reason to stop. Consistency interprets failure as part of the process. Consistency builds resilience. Each time you act despite low motivation, strength increases. This strength compounds. Over time, resistance decreases. Action becomes easier not because motivation is higher, but because discipline is stronger. Consistency is quiet. It does not announce itself. It does not demand attention. Yet it shapes outcomes more reliably than motivation ever could. Motivation may begin the journey, but consistency carries it forward through uncertainty, difficulty, and time, shaping identity, capability, and progress through repeated action aligned with intention rather than emotion.